The knock came just as I was dropping my duffel bag onto the floor, the weight of months at sea still pressing down on me. I froze, mid-step, boots scuffing against the hardwood. It wasn't Jessica's kind of knock. Too sharp, too urgent. When I opened the door, Greg stood there, shoulders tense, his face a mixture of anger and pity. Greg, my neighbor, always friendly, always polite. But tonight, his eyes burned with something else entirely. "I can't do this anymore, Adam," he blurted, voice low but firm. He glanced over his shoulder, scanning the street like someone might be watching. "You deserve to know what's been happening while you've been gone." My stomach tightened instantly. "What are you talking about?" I asked, gripping the doorframe. Greg was shaking his head, muttering something under his breath. Then he straightened up and looked me dead in the eyes. "Your wife," he said, "Jessica, she's been throwing parties, every damn weekend, strangers coming and going. Loud music, broken bottles on the sidewalk. It's not just that, Adam. She's got men over, different men. I've seen it with my own eyes." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for him to laugh and say it was some stupid misunderstanding. But Greg wasn't laughing. He was clenching his fists, his voice trembling as he added, "The kids, Adam, your kids, they're there in the middle of it all." My mouth went dry. "Greg, if this is some kind of—" "It's not," he cut me off. He shoved his phone into my hands. "Here. Look." I didn't want to, but my eyes dropped to the screen. Grainy footage recorded through Greg's window. My living room. My couch. Jessica sprawled out with some guy, his arm slung casually around her shoulders, her head tilted back in laughter. Around them, a sea of people drinking, dancing, shouting. The floor littered with trash, my daughter's toy unicorn lying abandoned under the coffee table. I couldn't hear the sound, but I could feel the chaos pouring out of that screen like a toxic cloud. "That's not all," Greg said, his voice like gravel. "She's been letting the kids run wild while she's busy entertaining. I found your son crying on my porch one night. Said he didn't want to go back inside. He stopped, his hands balling into fists again. "I can't just stand by anymore. You're a good man, Adam. You don't deserve this." For a second, the world tilted on its axis. I felt like I was still on the ship, waves rocking me side to side. My home, my sanctuary, had turned into something unrecognizable. I looked at Greg, his face etched with frustration and guilt, and I knew he was telling the truth. Before I could say a word, Greg leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "You need to handle this, for yourself, for your kids. But whatever you do, don't let her know I told you." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway, the phone still clutched in my hand. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as a million questions flooded my mind. Who were those men? How long had this been going on? And why the hell hadn't anyone else said anything? I stepped back inside, the door shutting behind me with a dull thud. The house felt colder, quieter than it should have. I stared at the walls, the furniture, the photos of Jessica, and the kids smiling back at me from the mantel. It was all a lie, wasn't it? All of it. I had come home ready to be a husband, a father, a man proud of his family. Now, I was left with nothing but Greg's words and that sickening video, both of them cutting into me like a blade. Somewhere upstairs, Jessica's voice rang out, calling for me, cheerful and sweet as ever. I slipped the phone into my pocket and forced myself to answer. The game had just begun, and she didn't even know the rules were about to change. I couldn't shake Greg's words as I stood in the hallway, Jessica's cheerful voice echoing down the stairs. For a moment, I considered storming up there, demanding answers, flipping the entire house upside down. But something stopped me, a voice in my head telling me to wait, to think. If she was capable of all this under my nose, she'd have lies ready. I needed to see it for myself. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside under the guise of getting some air. The night was heavy with a humid silence, the kind that felt almost oppressive. My boots crunched on the gravel driveway as I walked around the side of the house, heart pounding like a war drum. It was strange. I'd lived here for years. Yet tonight it felt foreign, like stepping into enemy territory. The first thing I noticed was the faint smell of stale beer. It hung in the air like a bad memory, growing stronger as I approached the back patio. I crouched down by the sliding glass door and peered inside. The place looked clean at first glance. Too clean. Almost like she'd gone out of her way to erase something. But under the glow of the dim kitchen light, there it was. A smashed beer bottle in the corner, shards glinting like tiny accusations. I moved closer, my shadow stretching across the deck. Through the living room window, I spotted more signs, subtle but damning. Scuff marks on the hardwood floor, the kind you get when a crowd of people doesn't care how they walk. A stack of mismatched solo cups in the trash bin, barely concealed under a layer of crumpled paper towels. The kicker was the couch. A throw blanket was draped over it, sloppily, as if someone had tried to cover a stain in a rush. My stomach churned. I stepped back, my breath shallow. The yard was dark except for the faint glow from the windows, but I noticed something near the tree line, a few cigarette butts scattered in the grass. Jessica didn't smoke. Neither did I. I scanned the perimeter again, squinting in the dim light, when I spotted a half-empty bottle of whiskey nestled in the bushes. It wasn't ours. I leaned down, picked it up, and inspected the label. Expensive. Too expensive for Jessica to just leave lying around. It hit me then. These weren't just signs of a party. They were signs of ownership, as if someone else had claimed this space as their own. Someone who didn't belong here. The urge to storm back inside was almost overwhelming, but I clenched my fists and forced myself to breathe. I couldn't let her know I was onto her. Not yet. This wasn't just about catching her. It was about understanding the scope of what she'd done. I couldn't confront her without every piece of the puzzle. Not if I wanted the truth. I slipped the whiskey bottle into my jacket pocket and made my way back to the front door, my mind racing with possibilities. Why had Greg waited so long to tell me? Who were these people she let into our home? And, most importantly, what else had been hidden from me? As I stepped inside, the smell of Jessica's perfume hit me, too sweet and cloying. She was standing in the kitchen, her phone in one hand, smiling like nothing had ever been wrong. "Hey, where'd you go?" she asked, her voice light. "Just needed some fresh air," I said, forcing my tone to stay calm. My eyes scanned the room, noting how she leaned casually against the counter, the same spot where Greg's video had shown a stranger just nights ago. I clenched my jaw and smiled back. "Did you miss me?" she teased, stepping closer, completely unaware that the game had already begun. "Not yet, Jessica," I thought to myself. Not yet. I didn't sleep much after that night. The scuff marks, the whiskey bottle, Greg's words. They all swirled in my mind, forming a picture I wasn't ready to see. But I knew one thing for certain. I needed to know everything. Confronting Jessica too soon would give her the upper hand. I needed proof, undeniable and inescapable. The next day, I called Mike, my old Marine buddy who ran a security company. He owed me a favor, and I wasn't shy about cashing it in. "I need cameras," I told, my voice steady but cold. "Hidden ones. Everywhere. Discreet, Buck." Mike didn't ask questions. By nightfall, the cameras were installed. Tiny, undetectable lenses tucked into corners, vents, and fixtures. Living room, kitchen, the hallway leading to our bedroom. There wasn't a single blind spot. I watched the setup silently, my jaw clenched, every fiber of me screaming that this was the right move. Jessica was out with the kids when it happened. She never suspected a thing. For weeks, I waited. Every spare moment I had aboard the ship, I checked the footage through a secured app on my phone. At first, there was nothing. Jessica went about her day, the kids played, and for a moment, I began to doubt myself. Maybe Greg was exaggerating. Maybe the party signs were old. Maybe. Then I saw him. It was late, barely a sliver of moonlight illuminating the house. Jessica had put the kids to bed and was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. At first, the scene looked normal, almost boring. But then headlights flashed through the living room window. She jumped up, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in years. My chest tightened as she opened the door. Brad. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. Brad wasn't just anyone. He was a guy I knew. A guy I trusted. We weren't close friends, but he was familiar enough to make this sting 10 times worse. He was holding a bottle of champagne, grinning like he owned the place. Jessica welcomed him with open arms, her smile wide, her eyes sparkling. Long day, he joked, stepping inside. You have no idea, she replied, her tone dripping with something I didn't recognize anymore. She shut the door behind him, her hand brushing his back as she did. I watched as they moved into the living room, champagne glasses appearing out of nowhere. Jessica poured, her movements deliberate, almost flirtatious. She sat close to him on the couch. Too close. They laughed together, their heads tilting toward each other in that sickeningly intimate way. My fists clenched as I saw her lean in, her hand casually resting on his knee. It wasn't outright betrayal yet, but it was enough to make my blood boil. The worst part wasn't even their proximity, it was her face. That easy, glowing smile she used to save for me. The light in her eyes that used to greet me when I came home from deployment. It was all there, but it wasn't mine anymore. I fast-forwarded the footage, needing to know how far this went. Their ladder grew softer, their movements slower. She touched his arm, her fingers lingering, and he leaned closer. My stomach churned, my head spinning with anger, disbelief, and a sickening sense of inevitability. Finally, I shut the app, my hand trembling as I gripped the phone. The walls of my bunk felt like they were closing in on me, the familiar hum of the ship's engines no longer a comfort. This wasn't just a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was real. Jessica had brought another man, Brad of all people, into my home, into our home. I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding as the pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. How long had this been going on? How many times had Brad, or others, walked through my door like they belonged there? And what kind of person had Jessica become? Smiling at him like that while our kids slept upstairs. The rage bubbling inside me wasn't just for her. It was for me. For being blind, for trusting her. For giving my life to someone who had already decided I wasn't enough. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think clearly. This wasn't the time to lose control. This was the time to prepare. Brad might have been the first piece, but I knew there was more. And I was going to uncover every damn bit of it. The footage started innocently enough, just like the other nights I'd been watching. Jessica was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine, while Brad lounged on the couch like he owned the damn place. His legs were propped up on my coffee table, the same table where my kids and I used to sit and play board games. My chest tightened as I watched him glance toward the stairs. "Tea asleep?" he asked casually, taking a sip from his glass. "Yeah," Jessica replied, her tone too relaxed, too familiar. She joined him on the couch, her movements slow, deliberate. She tucked her legs under her, leaning closer. "We've got the whole night." I fast-forwarded, knowing what was coming but not ready to watch it in real time. They stayed up late, talking, laughing, their bodies inching closer until there was no space left between them. When the lights went out, my vision blurred with anger, but I forced myself to keep watching. This wasn't just anger, it was strategy. Every second of this was evidence, every touch, every laugh, every betrayal. It was what happened the next morning that gutted me. The camera in the hallway caught Brad coming down the stairs, barefoot and shirtless, as casual as if he lived there. My son's bedroom door creaked open, and my 2 kids came bounding out, their sleepy faces lighting up when they saw him. "Daddy," my son yelled, running straight for him. Brad crouched down, catching him in his arms with an exaggerated laugh. "Hey, buddy," he said, ruffling his hair like he'd done it 100 times before. My daughter followed, grabbing onto his leg and giggling. "Daddy, look at my doll." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My kids, the same kids who'd made me little drawings saying how much they missed me, were calling this man Daddy. Jessica appeared behind him, her hair messy from the night before, holding a cup of coffee. She watched the scene unfold with a smirk, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Breakfast is almost ready," she said, leaning against the wall as if this was her perfect little family. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to do anything but keep watching. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I saved the footage, labeling it with a cold, clinical precision. This wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. Jessica hadn't just cheated on me. She'd let someone else step into my life, into my role as a father. She'd allowed my children to believe, even for a second, that this stranger was their dad. I stared at the screen, my reflection staring back at me in the darkened glass. The rage boiling inside me was almost too much to contain, but I forced it down. Emotions could come later. Right now, I needed to stay clear-headed. I had proof now. Proof that went beyond parties and whispers. This was the kind of betrayal you couldn't walk back from, the kind that demanded justice. Closing the app, I leaned back against the cold steel wall of my bunk. My hands were trembling, but my mind was sharp, focused. Jessica didn't know it yet. But she'd made a mistake. One she wasn't going to recover from. When I walked through the front door, Jessica greeted me with a bright, practiced smile. Like nothing had happened. She threw her arms around me, the smell of her perfume clinging too sweetly to the air, masking the rot beneath the surface. My stomach twisted, but I hugged her back, my hand steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Missed you so much," she said, her voice light and warm. "Missed you too," I replied, forcing a smile as I stepped back. My eyes darted around the house, searching for the subtle signs I now knew how to spot. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but I knew better now. The kids came running, their laughter filling the room. My son threw his arms around my leg, while my daughter proudly held up a new drawing she'd made. For a moment, I nearly let my guard down. Their innocence, their love, it was everything I'd been holding on to while I was away. But then, in the back of my mind, I heard the word again. Daddy. And I remembered who else they'd said it to. I knelt down, ruffling their hair, my voice steady despite the tightness in my chest. "Missed you too the most," I said, my smile not quite reaching my eyes. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of forced normalcy. Jessica chatted about the kids, the neighbors, little things that used to matter. I nodded, replied when necessary, all the while piecing together my next move. She had no idea what I'd seen, and I wasn't about to tip her off. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, every muscle in my body tense. The image of Brad holding my kids, their joyful cries of daddy, played over and over in my head like a cruel loop. I needed answers, not just about her betrayal, but about the one question I couldn't ignore. Were they even mine? The thought clawed at me, relentless and cruel. It wasn't just my pride at stake. It was my identity as their father, the very core of who I was. If Brad was their real father, then Jessica had been lying to me for far longer than I'd imagined. The next morning, while Jessica was busy with breakfast and the kids, I made my move. I slipped out, saying I needed to run an errand. My first stop was a local lab, one that specialized in discrete DNA testing. The woman behind the counter barely glanced at me as I handed over the samples. A few hairs from my comb, carefully collected over the past few weeks, and a toothbrush from each of the kids. "How soon can I get results?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. 3 to 5 business days, she replied, handing me a receipt. I nodded, my face betraying nothing, and left without another word. As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. What if the tests confirmed my fears? What if they didn't? Either way, the truth was something I needed, no matter how much it might destroy me. When I returned, Jessica was in the living room, her phone in hand, smiling at something on the screen. I felt the rage bubble up but forced it down, schooling my face into a neutral expression. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice as casual as ever. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone light. "Just had to grab a few things for the ship." She nodded, completely oblivious to the cracks forming in the foundation of her carefully built lie. For the next few days, I played the part of the doting husband. every smile and gesture calculated to keep her in the dark. But inside, the tension was building. I checked my phone obsessively, waiting for the call from the lab, knowing that when it came, everything would change. I wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore. I was fighting for my kids, for the life I thought I had, for the justice she didn't think I was capable of delivering. And I wasn't going to stop until I had every piece of the puzzle in my hands. The call came in the late afternoon. I was alone in the garage, pretending to sort through old tools, but my hands were shaking when I answered. The voice on the other end was calm, clinical, oblivious to the hurricane it was unleashing. "Mr. Carter," the lab technician began, "the results are in. Neither of the children share your DNA." The words hit me like a freight train. For a moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The phone felt heavy in my hand, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. My kids, my world, weren't mine. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep my voice steady. "Thank you," I said flatly, ending the call. I didn't need details. The result was all I needed. I sat in silence for a long time, the distant sound of Jessica's ladder filtering through the walls as she played with the kids. My kids. No, her kids. The ones she'd let me believe were mine for years. The ones I'd held, comforted, sacrificed for, all while she spun this web of lies. By the time dinner rolled around, I'd locked away the storm brewing inside me. Jessica had made spaghetti, the smell of garlic and marinara filling the kitchen. The kids chattered happily about their day, oblivious of the truth hanging in the air. Jessica was smiling, serving plates like nothing was wrong, her movements so natural it made me sick. I sat across from her, my eyes locked on hers as she laughed at something our son said. She glanced at me, her smile faltering slightly. "Everything okay, Adam?" she asked, her tone casual but with a hint of unease. I set down my fork, leaning back in my chair. "Yeah," I said, my voice calm but cold. "Tomorrow, I want to talk to you. But for now," I gestured at the food, "let's enjoy this evening." Her face stiffened, the smile vanishing completely. "What's that supposed to mean?" she snapped, her voice sharper than she probably intended. "Exactly what I said," I replied, holding her gaze. "Tomorrow we talk. Tonight we eat." Her hand froze mid-air, the fork hovering just above her plate. Her eyes darted between mine, searching for clues, but I gave her nothing. No anger, no sorrow. Just silence. Her breath hitched slightly, and for the first time, I saw something crack behind her carefully constructed mask. Fear. "Adam. Tomorrow." I interrupted, my tone final. "Not tonight." She sat back, crossing her arms, her face hardening. "Fine," she said, her voice laced with irritation. But I caught it, the flash of panic in her eyes. She was already unraveling, already trying to piece together what I knew and how I knew it. The rest of dinner was tense, the once lively chatter of the kids now awkward and subdued. Jessica barely touched her food, her mind clearly racing. I stayed quiet, eating methodically, watching her every move. The game had shifted, and she knew it, but she didn't know how or why. As I cleared the table, I felt her eyes on me, burning with suspicion and anger. But I didn't look back. Not yet. Tomorrow, everything would come crashing down. And I wanted her to feel every second of the weight. The next morning, the air in the house was thick with tension. Jessica avoided me, her movements hurried and sharp as she shuffled around the kitchen. The kids were still asleep, their laughter and chatter mercifully absent. This confrontation wasn't for their ears. I waited until she sat at the dining table, coffee cup in hand, her phone screen glowing in the dim light. She glanced up as I walked in, her expression cautious. "So, are you going to tell me what this is about, or are you just going to keep sulking?" she snapped, her tone defensive. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling to the video. The one of her and Brad. Their little intimate scene in the living room, the laughter, the closeness. I set it on the table, hitting play. Her smirk faltered the second she recognized the scene. Her eyes widened, her face blanching as the sound of their laughter filled the room. She reached for the phone, but I snatched it back, letting the video loop just loud enough for her to hear. "Adam," She started, but I wasn't finished. I reached into my other pocket and tossed the DNA results onto the table, the papers sliding to a stop in front of her. "Explain," I said, my voice low and icy. Her hand hovered over the papers, trembling slightly. She didn't even look at them. Instead, her face twisted into anger, her voice rising. "You've been spying on me," she barked, slamming her hand on the table. "What the hell is wrong with you? Are you some kind of psychopath, Adam? Sneaking around, watching me like I'm a criminal?" Her outburst was expected. I stayed calm, leaning forward, my eyes boring into hers. "How long, Jessica?" I asked, cutting through her tirade. "How long have you been planning this little performance?" She recoiled slightly, caught off guard. Her eyes darted to the papers. "And performance? You're insane," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You're making things up, trying to control me." "Don't," I interrupted, my tone sharp enough to make her flinch. "Don't waste my time. The video, the DNA tests. Brad is their father, isn't he?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, might try to twist the knife further with another lie. But then her face hardened, her mask of innocence shattering into something raw and unapologetic. "Fine," she spat, crossing her arms. "Yes, Brad is their father. Happy now." Her voice was sharp. But I caught the flicker of fear in her eyes, the realization that the game was over. I leaned back, my hands gripping the edge of the chair to keep myself steady. The confirmation hit like a bullet, but I refused to let her see how deep it cut. "How long?" I asked again, my voice colder now. She shrugged, her expression defiant. "Does it matter? You were never around anyway. Deployments, missions. You left me here alone. What did you expect me to do? Just sit around and wait for you to come home and play hero?" Her words were venomous, but they didn't land. I'd already seen the truth in the videos, in the faces of my children who weren't mine. Her justifications were meaningless. "You let my kids—" "No, your kids. Call him Daddy," I said, my voice low but laced with fury. "You invited him into my home, into my life, and you think this is about me being away?" Jessica leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "Yes. Adam, because you weren't here. You think it's so easy, holding everything together while you're out playing soldier. Brad was here. He helped me. He cared." I cut her off, slamming my hand on the table. "He cared so much he hid behind your lies, Jessica. He cared so much he let me believe they were mine." Her mouth opened, but she didn't respond. For the first time, she had nothing to say, nothing to twist or deflect. She just sat there, glaring at me, her jaw tight. I stood picking up the DNA results on the phone. "This is far from over," I said, my voice steady. "You hear from my lawyer. And when this house is empty, when your lies come crashing down, I hope you remember one thing, Jessica. You did this. Not me. You." She didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any words she could have said. And as I walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there in the wreckage of her own making, I felt the first flicker of control return. This wasn't just about ending her lies anymore. It was about reclaiming everything she thought she could take from me. The moon hung low as I parked down the street from Brad's house, the engine of my truck humming softly before I cut it off. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes every creak and rustle feel amplified. I gripped the pistol in my lap, its cold weight grounding me, reminding me that this wasn't some reckless outburst. This was calculated, controlled. Brad's house was exactly what I expected, pristine, perfect. A picture of suburban comfort. The man who had shattered my life lived in a lie as clean and polished as his lawn. I slid out of the truck, pulling my jacket tighter around me as I moved toward the side of his house, sticking to the shadows. My heart was pounding, but my mind was sharp. There was no room for hesitation. The back door wasn't as secure as it should have been. A quick twist with the crowbar I'd brought, and I was inside, the lock giving way with a faint pop. I slipped through the doorway into a dark kitchen, my steps light, deliberate. The air inside smelled of leather and cologne, as if the man wanted to announce his arrogance in every detail of his life. I made my way through the house, scanning for movement. Brad's snores guided me to the bedroom, a low, steady rumble that sounded like mockery in the silence. He was sprawled out on his bed, one arm flung over the covers, his face slack and peaceful. He looked so at ease, so comfortable, that it ignited something primal in me. I stepped closer, my hand tightening around the pistol. The barrel felt heavier as I raised it, pointing it directly at his temple. I was so close I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the rise and fall of his chest. My finger hovered over the trigger, my breath steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Wake up," I whispered, my voice low and sharp, cutting through the darkness like a blade. Brad stirred, his eyes fluttering open. For a moment, he looked disoriented, his gaze shifting from the pistol to my face. Then the realization hit him, and his body tensed, his breath catching in his throat. "Adam," he croaked, his voice shaking. "What the hell are you doing?" "Shut up," I said, pressing the barrel harder against his temple. His entire body froze, his eyes wide with terror. "You don't get to talk right now. You're going to listen, and you're going to make a choice, doll." "Choice," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his eyes darting around as if searching for a way out. "Yeah, a choice," I said, my tone ice cold. "You're going to back off. From me, you from Jessica, from the kids. You're going to disappear, Brad. Completely. And you're going to do it without a fight. Because if you don't..." I let the sentence hang, the weight of the words sinking in. He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing as his eyes locked onto mine. "Adam, man, listen. I'm not here for excuses." I cut him off, my voice sharper now. "You made your choices. Now I'm giving you one last chance to make the right one. You step out of our lives, or I'll make sure this ends tonight. Right here, right now." Brad's breathing quickened, his chest heaving as he nodded frantically. Okay, I'll do whatever you want. I'll stay away. I swear, man. I swear," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Because if I ever see you near them again, if I even hear your name, you won't get another chance to walk away." I pulled the gun back, watching as he sagged against the bed, his body trembling. He looked at me, his fear etched deep into his face, and for the first time I saw him for what he really was. A coward, a parasite. Without another word, I turned and walked out. My footsteps silent against the floor. The night air hit me like a wave as I stepped outside, the pistol still heavy in my hand. I didn't look back. There was no need. Brad wasn't a threat anymore. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Jessica would know, and she would feel the full weight of what she'd done. For now, though, I allowed myself one small victory. Brad was gone, and that was the first step toward reclaiming the life he had tried to steal. The courtroom buzzed with a quiet hum as the judge entered, the sound of the gavel silencing the room. I sat at my table, my lawyer to my left, a mountain of evidence neatly stacked in front of us. Across the aisle, Jessica sat stiffly, her face a mask of defiance. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she barely nodded, her eyes occasionally darting toward me. The proceedings began with the formalities, but I barely heard them. My focus was on the papers Brad had signed just days before. Under the weight of the confrontation and the legal pressure I'd applied, he'd caved completely. Not only had he admitted to being the biological father of both children, but he'd also relinquished any claim to the house in a desperate bid to avoid a drawn-out legal war. Jessica didn't know that yet. Not entirely. She'd seen the writing on the wall, but her pride wouldn't let her accept that the foundation of her manipulations was crumbling beneath her feet. "Your Honor," my lawyer began, standing with a calm authority that filled the room, "we have provided ample evidence proving the respondent's pattern of behavior, infidelity, manipulation, and reckless endangerment of the children's emotional well-being. Furthermore, we submit these signed documents from Mr. Bradley Hayes, acknowledging his paternity and absolving my client, Adam Carter, and of any financial or parental obligations concerning the children." A murmur rippled through the courtroom as the papers were presented. Jessica's head snapped toward her lawyer, her face draining of color. She leaned in, whispering something frantic, but her lawyer's tight-lipped response made it clear there was no escape. The judge skimmed the documents, nodding slowly. "These appear to be in order," she said, her tone impartial but firm. "Do you have anything to counter this, Miss Carter?" Jessica shot to her feet, her voice sharp and panicked. "Your Honor, this whole thing is a setup. He's been spying on me, digging into my personal life like some obsessed lunatic. He's trying to ruin me because I made mistakes." "Mistakes," my lawyer countered, standing to address the judge. "Your Honor, the respondent's mistakes included hosting multiple men in her home while her husband was deployed, deceiving him into believing he was the father of 2 children, and using the family home for activities detrimental to the children's well-being. These are not mere mistakes. They are deliberate acts of betrayal and neglect." Jessica's face twisted into fury. "You don't know what it was like. He was never home. I had to do everything alone." I stayed silent, watching as she unraveled. The courtroom wasn't the place for me to speak. The evidence, the videos, the DNA results, Brad's signed confession, spoke louder than any words I could have mustered. The judge held up a hand, silencing the growing tension. "Ms. Carter, this court is not here to adjudicate your personal grievances against your husband. We are here to determine the best interests of the children and to resolve the property dispute." Jessica sank back into her chair, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. Her defiance was cracking, replaced by desperation. "In light of the evidence," the judge continued, her voice firm, "this court awards Mr. Carter full ownership of the marital home. Furthermore, given the respondent's documented behavior and the testimony provided, primary custody of the children will be granted to Mr. Carter. Ms. Carter will retain visitation rights, subject to supervision." The words hit like a thunderclap. Jessica's jaw dropped, her carefully crafted facade collapsing entirely. "No, this isn't fair," she shouted, rising to her feet again. "He's manipulating everyone. He's turning my kids against me. Ms. Carter." The judge said sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument, "If you cannot conduct yourself with decorum, I will hold you in contempt of court." But Jessica fell silent, trembling with rage but powerless to do anything. Across the aisle, I exhaled slowly, the tension that had been building for months finally beginning to lift. The gavel came down, finalizing the ruling. The courtroom emptied slowly, but Jessica stayed frozen in her seat, staring at the table in front of her. I didn't spare her a second glance as I walked out, my lawyer patting me on the shoulder. Outside, the air felt fresher, lighter. The battle wasn't easy, but it was over. Jessica had lost everything she thought she could manipulate into staying hers. The house, the kids, and the last shreds of her control were gone. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Triumph. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was justice. And that was worth everything. The courtroom was nearly empty now, but Jessica remained planted in her seat, gripping the edges of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she swatted him away with a flick of her hand. Her eyes locked on me with a burning intensity that would have been unsettling if I hadn't already seen her unravel. As I stood to leave, she exploded. "You think this makes you better than me, Adam?" She shrieked, her voice echoing off the walls. Heads turned. Those still in the room freezing mid-step to watch the scene unfold. "You think you've won? You're nothing without me. You're just a self-righteous coward who couldn't handle the truth." I didn't stop walking. Her words were like arrows shot from a broken bow. Wild, erratic, and powerless, I kept my head high, my steps steady as I made my way to the exit. The bailiff moved closer to her, his hand hovering near her shoulder as her tirade continued. "You stole my kids, my house. You took everything from me," she screamed, slamming her fists on the table. "I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me. By spying on me. By destroying my life. You're pathetic." "Adam." I reached the courtroom door and paused for a moment. Slowly, I turned back to look at her, my face calm, almost pitying. You destroyed your own life, Jessica, I said, my voice steady but cutting. All I did was make sure the truth caught up with you. Her face twisted with fury. But I didn't wait to hear whatever venomous words she had left. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors, the fresh air of the courthouse hallway washing over me like a cleansing wave. Behind me, I could still hear her shouting, her voice cracking under the weight of her anger and despair. Outside, the sunlight was bright and warm, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. I stood for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the reality of my victory settle in. She had lost everything, her lies, her manipulations, even the illusion of control she'd clung to so desperately. And for the first time, I felt free. This wasn't just a win in court. It was the end of her hold over me, the final break in the chain that had kept me tethered to her betrayal. Jessica could scream, rage, and blame me all she wanted, but the truth was undeniable. Her collapse was of her own making. I walked away from the courthouse with my head high and my heart lighter than it had been in years. Jessica's voice was just a fading echo behind me, no longer the weight it once was. She was done, and so was I. For good. As I stood on the porch of my reclaimed home, the sun setting behind me, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The chaos, the lies, the betrayal. It was all behind me now. The house was quiet, filled only with the laughter of my kids as they played in the backyard. Their joy was pure, untouched by the storm that had passed. This journey had taught me more than I ever wanted to know about betrayal, manipulation, and resilience. Jessica had tried to strip everything from me, my family, my dignity, my future. But she underestimated one thing, the resolve of someone willing to fight for the truth. The road wasn't easy. There were moments when the weight of it all felt unbearable, when it seemed easier to give up and let the lies win. But I didn't. I couldn't. And in the end, the truth set me free, not just from her, but from the illusions I'd been clinging to. I've learned one thing above all. You can't cheat someone who refuses to look away. Lies crumble in the face of determination. Manipulations shatter under the weight of evidence. And justice. Justice is what remains when you refuse to back down. As I watched my kids chase each other across the yard, their laughter echoing into the twilight, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. This was my life now, a life rebuilt on truth and strength. Jessica's collapse wasn't just her ending, it was my beginning. To anyone who reads this, let me leave you with this. No matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how heavy the lies, the truth always matters. Fight for it, defend it. Because in the end, it's the only thing worth holding on to. Now, I know that for certain. Only the truth matters.
I wasn't supposed to be home yet. The flight had been canceled due to a mechanical issue, and instead of waiting for a rescheduled trip, I took the first available connection home. No calls, no texts, just a quiet return to my own house. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. It wasn't just the silence. It was the unnatural stillness, like the house was holding its breath. Normally, Michelle would be in the living room, watching one of her shows too loudly. Donna would be in the kitchen, either cooking or on the phone with her sister, laughing about something trivial. But today, nothing. The air was wrong. I set my suitcase down quietly and closed the door without a sound. My ears strained against the quiet, searching for the disturbance in the usual rhythm of my home. Then there it was. A voice. No, two voices. Upstairs. One was unmistakably Donna's. The other was a man's. Deep, familiar, comfortable. My pulse slowed, then sped up. I took a breath, forced my feet forward. The wooden stairs groaned softly under my weight as I climbed, slow and deliberate. Each step felt heavier than the last. Then I heard it. Laughter. Hers first, then his, and that was when my stomach turned inside out. Because I knew that laugh. It wasn't some stranger. It wasn't some coworker she had been getting too close to. It was Joshua, my wife's stepbrother. I stopped at the top of the stairs, my fingers curling into fists. The bedroom door was cracked open just enough. Just enough for me to see the reflection in the dresser mirror. Donna was sprawled across our bed, her hair a mess, her lips swollen from kissing. Joshua was beside her, his arm draped over her waist, his shirt completely unbuttoned. My head went quiet. No rage, no immediate explosion of anger, just a sharp, clean silence inside me. She hadn't even locked the damn door, because she wasn't afraid of being caught. She didn't think she could be caught. I should have stormed in, yelled, fought. That's what she expected, wasn't it? That's what they always expect. But instead I just stood there, watching, listening, and then she saw me. Our eyes met through the mirror's reflection. Her face didn't drop in fear. No guilt, no shame, just surprise, then something worse. Relief, as if she was glad I finally knew. I took a slow breath, and then I did the last thing she expected. I smiled. I didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there in the doorway watching as my wife, ex-wife-to-be, sat up, her bare shoulders shifting under the sheets like she wasn't even ashamed. Joshua barely glanced at me, stretching like he'd just woken from a good nap, not like he'd just been caught screwing his stepsister in our bed. I waited for Donna to panic, to stammer out an excuse, to apologize, to realize she had just shattered 15 years of marriage in one stupid moment. But she didn't. Instead, she sighed, ran a hand through her tousled hair, and smiled. "Daniel," she said, her voice gentle, like she was trying to break something to me kindly. "I guess this is as good a time as any to tell you. Tell me what? That my life was a joke? That I'd been sleeping next to a woman who had been screwing her own stepbrother behind my back?" I waited, my silence pressing against the walls like a thick fog. She reached for the blanket, tugging it higher over herself, and exhaled through her nose. "We're in love, Daniel. We can finally be together." For a second, I swore the entire house tilted. My fingers twitched at my sides, itching to grab something, anything, to ground myself in the middle of whatever the hell was happening. Joshua just sat there, smirking like a goddamn fool, as if this was some fairy tale ending, like I was supposed to nod and give them my blessing. I opened my mouth. Then, a voice behind me, "Michelle." "Yeah, Dad," she said casually, as if she was commenting on the weather. "They were always meant to be together." I turned. She stood there at the top of the stairs, arms crossed over her chest, her expression unreadable. My daughter, my flesh and blood, the girl I had raised, protected, worked late nights for. The little girl who used to run to me when she scraped her knee, who used to beg me to read her bedtime stories, who used to call me her hero. She was smiling, like it was obvious, like I was the fool for not seeing it earlier. Something inside me cracked. It wasn't anger, not yet, not even pain. It was just emptiness, like I had suddenly been unhooked from my own life, floating above the scene like a stranger, watching my wife, her lover, my daughter, and realizing this wasn't my family. This wasn't my home. I had walked into a life that had already moved on without me. They weren't ashamed. They weren't sorry. They had just been waiting for me to catch up. Michelle tilted her head, watching my face, studying my reaction. Donna reached for Joshua's hand. "Daniel, I know this is a shock," she said gently, "but we don't have to make this messy. We want to do this the right way. We can figure everything out." Something dark curled inside me, something sharp. I forced myself to breathe, slow and even. I could see it now, how they had planned this, how Michelle knew, how they had all been waiting for the right time, the right way to tell me, as if I was the problem, as if I was the last loose end that needed tying up. Donna was still talking, trying to make it sound reasonable. "We want to keep things as civil as possible. No need for lawyers, no need for fighting." I smiled. It was slow, cold. "That's what makes you happy?" I asked quietly. Her lips parted slightly. "What?" I nodded toward Joshua, toward them. "If this is what makes you happy," I said, my voice so calm it felt foreign in my own throat, "then I won't stand in the way." Donna blinked, caught off guard. I watched it happen, the flicker of confusion in her expression. She had expected anger, had expected screaming, fighting, begging. But all I did was smile. And that's when I saw it, the first hint of fear in her eyes. Donna searched my face, expecting something, anything, anger, rage, a broken man collapsing under the weight of betrayal. Instead, I smiled, a small, measured smile. the kind that made her eyes flicker with hesitation. If that's what makes you happy, I repeated slowly, deliberately, then I won't stand in the way. Silence stretched between us. Joshua cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly. He wasn't expecting this either. Donna tilted her head slightly, watching me as if trying to solve a puzzle she didn't even know existed. Daniel, I held up a hand. Not aggressive, not bitter, just a simple, dismissive gesture. I get it, I said. You two were meant to be together. I was just in the way. She hesitated. Michelle, still standing at the top of the stairs, crossed her arms. So what now? I turned to her, my daughter who had just taken a wrecking ball to my entire life with a single sentence. We'll figure it out, I said evenly. And then I left. Not a slammed door, not a single curse thrown over my shoulder, just a quiet exit. And that's what unsettled them the most. That night, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My house, their house now, stood behind me, glowing warmly through the windows. How many nights had I come home, thinking that light meant safety, that it meant family? How many times had I walked through that door, blind to the fact that I was the outsider in my own home? I should have felt something, anything, but instead, all I felt was a strange, calm clarity. 15 years, gone. Not just the marriage, not just the house, but Michelle, the little girl who used to hold my hand and beg me to stay 5 more minutes at bedtime. The one I had carried on my shoulders, who had wrapped her tiny arms around my neck and whispered, I love you, Daddy, in my ear. That little girl had stood there and said, they were always meant to be together. Like I had been a placeholder. Like I had been irrelevant. I exhaled slowly and pulled out my phone. There was only one person I needed to call. Stephen answered on the second ring. Daniel. His voice was groggy. I'd forgotten it was nearly midnight. I need a divorce lawyer, I said calmly. Silence. Then, what the hell happened? I smiled. I'm going to make sure they get exactly what they deserve. The next morning, I didn't go home. I didn't return to their house, to the wreckage of my marriage. I went to the bank, to my lawyer, to my financial advisor. Donna had always been careless with the details, always trusting me to handle the boring stuff. Taxes, assets, paperwork. She had no idea what was coming. I spent the entire day moving things, rearranging, not out of spite, not out of vengeance, just strategy. By the time I was done, my accounts were locked down. The house? No longer in my name. The business investments? Moved. Donna had always assumed she'd walk away with half. She was about to learn the hard way that assumption was the most expensive mistake of her life. And the best part? She wouldn't even realize it until it was too late. Stephen leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple as he scanned the documents I had placed in front of him. You've been busy, he murmured, flipping through page after page of asset transfers, property adjustments, and banking restructures. I nodded. I need this done fast. He glanced up at me. You're not looking to fight her in court? No. My voice was level. I don't want to fight. I want control. Stephen let out a low whistle. Most guys in your position are out slashing tires or getting drunk in a motel. You're gutting her without even lifting a knife. I didn't respond, just watched as he went back to reviewing my paperwork. Everything I had spent years building, our house, the accounts, the investments, was being carved apart, but not in her favor. Donna thought she had me cornered. She thought I'd roll over, hand her half, and slink away like some pathetic loser. She was wrong. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was loud. Anger was messy. I was cold, methodical, and she had no idea. The next few days were surgical. The house already moved out of my name. I had structured it through an LLC years ago, and with a few well-placed signatures, the company transferred ownership. The bank accounts drained. Not to zero, that would be suspicious, but just enough to make sure when she tried to access what she thought was hers, she'd find nothing but shadows. The business untouchable. She had never paid attention to how I structured things. She thought she was entitled to half of my stake. But my stake? Gone. Moved through silent, legal backdoors into a trust she could never reach. By the time she saw the divorce papers, the financial autopsy would already be complete. She'd be left with a house she didn't own, accounts she couldn't access, and a man, Joshua, who had no idea the gold mine he thought he was inheriting was nothing but sand slipping through his fingers. Michelle called me on the third day. I stared at the phone as it buzzed on my desk. Then I let it ring out. For the first time in her life, she was going to understand what it meant to be ignored. Stephen sent me a text late that evening. Everything is in place. By the time she realizes it, it'll be too late. I stared at the message, then typed back 2 simple words. Good. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of everything pressing down on me. This wasn't revenge. This was survival. Donna wanted her new life. She was about to get it. Just not the way she imagined. The courthouse smelled like old paper and stale coffee. I had been here before, years ago, finalizing paperwork for the house. Back then, Donna had clung to my arm, smiling as we signed documents that tied us together legally, financially, permanently. Today, she wasn't clinging to my arm. Today, she walked in ahead of me, her heels clicking against the polished floor, confidence radiating off her like cheap perfume. She was dressed for victory. A crisp, tailored suit in a shade of navy just dark enough to look expensive. The kind of outfit that said I'm in control. Joshua followed behind her, his usual smug expression plastered on his face. He had that same overconfident swagger, like he had already won, like this was just a formality before Donna walked out of here with half of everything I had worked for. I stayed a few steps behind, my hands in my pockets, my expression unreadable. She didn't look back. Good. Let her think she was winning. We sat across from each other at the long wooden table. Her lawyer, some overpriced shark in a sleek suit, shuffled papers and spoke in a tone that oozed arrogance. Donna was perched on the edge of her seat, chin lifted, poised like a queen about to receive her kingdom. Joshua sat beside her, one arm draped over the back of his chair like this was his victory too. Like he was walking away with the spoils of war. I barely glanced at them. The judge entered, a middle-aged man with tired eyes who had clearly seen too many divorces in his lifetime. He barely spared us a glance before he sat down and adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Carter," he said, turning to me, "are you prepared to settle?" I could feel Donna's anticipation. She had rehearsed this in her mind 100 times, picturing me broken, angry, defeated. She thought I'd fight, thought I'd make a scene. Instead, I reached for the pen and signed. No hesitation, no emotion, just a single, fluid signature. When I slid the papers back across the table, Donna blinked. Her lawyer blinked. Even Joshua's smirk faltered slightly. This wasn't the reaction they had expected. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I leaned back in my chair, completely at ease. Donna's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table. "That's it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice smooth, but I could hear the slight edge to it. I tilted my head slightly, just enough to let the corner of my mouth twitch in something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's it," I said. I could see it now, the first crack in her confidence. The first tiny, creeping doubt. She still thought she had won. She still thought this was going to end with her walking out of here with everything she wanted. But somewhere, deep in the back of her mind, something was off. Something wasn't right. And she didn't even know it yet. The judge adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. The papers rustled in his hands as he flipped through them, barely glancing up. "Mr. Carter, do you agree to the terms as presented?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." I picked up the pen, turned to the last page, and signed my name in smooth, deliberate strokes. I didn't pause, didn't blink, didn't ask a single question, just signed, and slid the papers back across the table. The room went quiet. Donna let out a breath, a slow, pleased exhale as she leaned back in her chair, finally relaxing. Her posture shifted, her confidence returning, like she had just secured an effortless win. Joshua smirked beside her, his hand resting lazily on the table, as if this whole thing had been a formality. The judge nodded. "Very well. This will now move to final processing." Donna turned to her lawyer, her expression practically glowing. She had been expecting a fight. She had wanted a fight because that's what she had planned for. She was prepared for anger. She was prepared for me to argue over every last cent, to throw accusations, to drag this out in court for months. She wasn't prepared for this. For me to just sign. For me to give up everything so easily. And that's when it started. That first sliver of unease. I watched it flicker across her face. So subtle, so fleeting, that she didn't even recognize it at first. Her lawyer flipped through the pages, nodding to himself. Everything looked standard. Everything seemed normal. And yet, something was off. I could see it in the way Donna's fingers tapped lightly against the table. The way her eyes flicked to the judge, then back to me, then back to the papers. Too easy. Too clean. She glanced at Joshua, and for the first time he wasn't smirking. Even he could feel it now. Something was wrong. But they didn't know what. Not yet. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly, letting the silence stretch, letting them sit in it. The shark of a lawyer beside Donna straightened his tie, flipping through the pages again, slower this time. It was there, buried, waiting. The realization hadn't hit yet. But when it did, oh, it was going to burn. The pen had barely left the paper when I saw it. The shift. It started with Donna's lawyer. He had been flipping through the pages with practiced disinterest, the way all high-priced lawyers do when they think they've already won. His fingers slid over the thick stack, his eyes barely scanning the details, just confirming what he assumed he already knew. Then, his hand paused. The motion of flipping the page slowed. I watched as his brow furrowed, his lips pressing into a thin, uncertain line. He blinked once, then leaned in, suddenly reading, actually reading the fine print. His posture stiffened. And just like that, the first domino fell. Donna noticed immediately. Her victory high faltered, her relaxed posture shifting into something tighter. "What?" she asked, her voice still breezy, still confident. "What's wrong?" The lawyer didn't answer. Not at first. He just flipped back a few pages, his eyes darting over the text, a muscle twitching in his jaw. I saw it the exact moment he understood. The moment he realized what I had done. His head snapped up, and he looked straight at me. Not at Donna. Not at Joshua. At me. Like he had just found a bomb ticking at the center of the contract. "Mr. Carter," he said carefully, his voice measured. "Could you step outside with us for a moment?" I didn't move. Didn't blink. "No," I said simply. His lips pressed tighter. Donna was frowning now, irritated at being left out of something she clearly thought was already hers. "Would someone like to explain to me what's going on?" she snapped, reaching for the stack of papers. The lawyer hesitated, like he didn't want her to read it, like he wanted to handle this quietly before she realized what had happened. But it was too late. Donna snatched the contract and pulled it toward her, her eyes scanning the top of the page. At first, she read lazily, as if she was just confirming the numbers she had already counted in her head. Then, she slowed. Her lips parted slightly. Her eyes darted back, then forward again. The first sliver of doubt flickered across her expression. She flipped a page, then another. Her breathing changed. "Wait," she muttered under her breath, flipping back again. This isn't right." Joshua, still oblivious, leaned over her shoulder with an amused smirk. "What's wrong, babe?" he chuckled. "Getting all that money making your head spin?" Then he looked down. Then he read. His smirk faded. His forehead creased. "What is this?" Joshua muttered, reaching for the papers himself. I just sat there, calm, silent, watching, because the trap wasn't just closing. It had already snapped shut. And Donna? She had no idea how deep the pit was beneath her feet. Donna's fingers tightened around the papers, her perfectly manicured nails pressing into the thick stack like she could physically force the words to change. Her breath hitched. She flipped another page, then another. "No," she whispered, barely audible. Then again louder. "No, no, no, no." Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at me, because he knew. I could see it in his eyes, the reluctant respect, the realization that he had underestimated me, that Donna had waltzed into this courtroom thinking she was about to take everything, and instead, she had just set fire to her entire life. Joshua still didn't get it. "Babe, what the hell are you freaking out about?" he muttered, snatching the top few pages from her grip and skimming them lazily. "You're getting the house, the accounts, He stopped. His smirk flickered. His eyes moved faster now, scanning the words, his fingers gripping the edge of the paper a little too tightly. "Wait," he muttered. "Wait." Donna sucked in a sharp breath, her head snapping up toward me. Her confidence? Gone. That smug, self-satisfied gleam in her eye? Replaced with raw, growing panic. "You..." Her voice cracked. "What did you do?" I tilted my head slightly, just enough for the smallest ghost of a smile to touch my lips. "You should really read the whole thing," I said smoothly. "Not just the parts you expected to see." Her hands were shaking now as she turned another page, her chest rising and falling too quickly. The house? Not mine anymore. Transferred weeks ago. Legally untouchable. The bank accounts? Drained. Moved. Reallocated into places she couldn't touch. The investments? Vanished from her reach. All those years of her assuming she'd get half of everything. All those smug little comments about how divorce courts always favor the wife. It had all been a fantasy. She wasn't getting half. She was getting nothing. Joshua's face was turning red, his jaw clenching as he gripped the papers like they were some cruel trick. This isn't right," he stammered. You had money. You had assets. Where the hell is all of it?" "Safe," I said simply. Donna's breathing was ragged now, her carefully styled hair slightly disheveled from the way she kept running her hands through it in mounting panic. "You can't do this," she hissed, eyes darting between me and the judge, like she was expecting someone to intervene. This isn't fair." The judge sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Mrs. Carter, you signed the agreement. The assets were disclosed, and the terms were agreed upon. But there's nothing left," she snapped, her voice rising. He tricked me." I chuckled. "Low, quiet. Did I?" Her head whipped toward me. Her breathing was erratic now, her hands gripping the arms of her chair like she was trying to steady herself. She had thought she was winning. She had thought she had me backed into a corner. But Donna had never paid attention to the details. She had never bothered to learn how our finances worked, never cared to understand the boring legal side of things. She had just assumed that she'd walk away rich. Now, she was staring at the truth. Cold, undeniable in black and white. She wasn't walking away with half. She was walking away with nothing. And it was only just now sinking in. Her entire world was collapsing. And I was just sitting there, watching, waiting, enjoying the show. Donna's face went white, not pale, not just shocked, white, like the blood had drained from her entirely, like she was really realizing, that this wasn't some mistake, some trick, some temporary misunderstanding. This was real. This was final. And there was nothing she could do. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. Just a shallow, panicked inhale. Then another. Then, "No," came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. She shook her head, eyes darting wildly across the papers, her breath hitching, like she was searching for some hidden clause, some escape route that didn't exist. "No, no, no, and no." She pushed the papers away like they were poison, shoving them across the table as if physically rejecting the reality in front of her could make it change. The lawyer beside her didn't move, didn't say a word. He knew. He had read it first. He had seen the numbers, the transfers, the fine print Donna had glossed over in her arrogance. She turned to him now, her fingers curling into the sleeve of his expensive suit. "Fix this," she hissed, her voice frantic, desperate. "Do you owe something?" The lawyer sighed, carefully, deliberately. He pried her fingers off of him, smoothed his sleeve, and spoke in a calm, detached voice. "Mrs. Carter," he began. Donna whipped around before he could finish. Her wild eyes locked onto the judge. "This isn't right," she shouted, her voice echoing through the courtroom. "He tricked me. He manipulated the accounts. The judge adjusted his glasses, completely unfazed by the meltdown unraveling in front of him. "Mrs. Carter," he said evenly, flipping through the stack of signed documents. "You signed the agreement." He tapped the paperwork with his index finger. "This is legally binding." "No." Donna slammed her hands onto the table, her breathing rapid and uneven. Her hair was a mess now, her perfect posture gone. She looked wrecked. Not the composed, victorious woman who had walked in here 30 minutes ago, expecting to waltz out with half of everything I had built. No, this was a woman in free fall. Joshua, to his credit, had finally caught up. His tan face was draining of color, his brows pinched together as he leaned forward, eyes darting between Donna, the judge, and the papers like he had missed a step somewhere. "Wait! Hold on!" he muttered, grabbing the stack of documents, flipping through them. "He doesn't have anything? That's not possible." Donna snapped at him, her voice a sharp, hysterical whisper. "He had investments, accounts, the house." She turned back to the judge. "Make him split it." The judge sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he had seen this exact meltdown 100 times before. "Mrs. Carter," he said, patient but firm. "The assets were disclosed. The financial records are clear. Mr. Carter is in full compliance with the law. You agreed to this arrangement when you signed the documents." "I didn't know," she shrieked, her voice cracking. A slow smile curled at the edge of my lips. I leaned forward slightly, just enough for her to see it. "But you should have," I murmured. Donna's head snapped toward me. Her lips trembled. Her hands clenched into fists. For the first time in her life, Donna, manipulative, entitled, always in control Donna, was powerless. And she knew it. Her control had slipped. Her plan had failed. She was completely trapped. And the best part? She had done it to herself. For a moment, there was complete silence. Donna sat there, chest heaving, eyes darting between the judge, the papers, and me, like she was still searching for some way out, some loophole, some savior. Then the silence cracked. "You can't do this to me." Her chair screeched against the floor as she shot to her feet, hands clenched into fists. Every bit of that carefully curated composure she had walked in with was gone. Her face was twisted, red, furious, desperate. "This isn't fair," she shrieked, slamming her hands onto the table. "I gave you 15 years, Daniel. 15 years of my life." I almost laughed at the audacity. She gave me 15 years? Like she hadn't spent those years lying to my face? Sneaking around? Making plans behind my back? I didn't react, didn't flinch. I just watched. The courtroom was dead silent except for her ragged breathing. Donna whipped around, looking for backup. Her lawyer was already checked out, closing his briefcase with slow, deliberate movements. Like a man who had just lost a case and wanted to be anywhere but here. Her gaze snapped to Joshua next. And that's when it got worse. Because for the first time since this started, he had nothing to say. He wasn't smirking anymore. He wasn't gloating. He was just staring at the papers in front of him. Donna's breathing hitched. "Joshua." He didn't look at her. "Joshua, say something," she snapped, reaching for his arm. "We'll fight this. We'll." Joshua finally looked up, and I saw it. That moment of realization, that flicker of self-preservation, that quiet, sinking dread as he finally understood what she had dragged him into. He had latched onto her thinking she was his golden ticket, that she was walking away with half of everything I had built, and that meant he would be reaping the benefits. But now he saw the truth. She wasn't getting half. She was getting nothing, which meant he was getting nothing. Joshua swallowed hard, pulled his arm free from her grip, and leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He was done. Donna felt it. She turned back to me, her last hope. "Daniel," she breathed, voice trembling now. You don't have to do this. We can fix this, we can." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. And for the first time since this entire circus started, I smiled. Not a smirk, not some smug expression. A slow, calm, final smile. "You were always meant to be together." Donna's face crumbled. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Just a sharp, ragged inhale. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and straightened my tie. And without another word, I walked out, never looking back. I reached for the door handle, feeling the weight of 15 years pressing against my back. But before I could step through, I heard it. "Daniel, please." Her voice cracked, raw and desperate. No longer the smug, overconfident woman who thought she had me beaten. I turned slightly, just enough to see her out of the corner of my eye. Donna was on her feet now, her hands trembling, her eyes wild with panic. "This isn't right," she pleaded. We can fix this." I just stared at her. Fix this? There was nothing left to fix. But she wasn't done. She took a step toward me, hands reaching like she could physically pull me back into the life she had burned to the ground. I made a mistake," she whispered, her voice thick with desperation. "I got caught up. I wasn't thinking. She sucked in a sharp breath. She wanted me to believe it, that this was just some temporary lapse in judgment. That all of this, the affair, the betrayal, the way she humiliated me, wasn't who she really was. She thought I could be talked down, that I would forgive her, that after everything she had done I would just undo it. I let the silence stretch between us, watching as the realization sank into her. The finality of it. Donna's breath shuddered. "Please." I tilted my head slightly, letting my eyes flick to Joshua. He was still seated, arms crossed, his expression dark. He had checked out already. He wasn't going to fight for her. He wasn't going to be her safety net. Donna was alone now, completely, utterly alone. I exhaled softly, then let my lips curl into something small, something satisfied. "You were always meant to be together." Her lips parted, her throat working as she tried to say something. Anything. I let the final words sink in. Then, with one last look, I delivered the killing blow. "Now you have nothing but each other." Her face collapsed, a broken, shattered thing. I turned away, and this time, I walked out, never looking back, never regretting it, never feeling anything but the sharp, crisp freedom that came with leaving dead weight behind. Donna sat in the dim, suffocating silence of her tiny one-bedroom apartment, the flickering overhead light making everything look even more pathetic than it already was. The cheap, second-hand couch she was sitting on sagged beneath her. The walls were blank, lifeless. The floors creaked with every movement. This wasn't her life. This wasn't where she was supposed to be. She had plans. She was supposed to be basking in her fresh start, settled into the house she thought she was getting, enjoying the luxury that came with taking what she assumed would always be there for her. But instead, she had this, a stack of unpaid bills on the cheap coffee table, a fridge half empty, the last of her savings vanishing faster than she could keep up with. And in her hands, a letter. The envelope was slightly crumpled from where she had been gripping it too hard, her nails digging into the edges. She knew what it said. She had read it once already, but her mind refused to accept it. She forced herself to look again. Joshua's handwriting was quick, impersonal, scrawled across the page in short, clipped sentences. "Donna, I'm done. This isn't what I signed up for. You don't have anything left, and I'm not going to sit around waiting for things to get worse. Don't try to call me. I've moved on. Joshua." Her hands clenched the letter so hard the paper wrinkled beneath her fingers. Her breath was shallow. Her chest hurt. She had lost Daniel. She had lost the house. She had lost the money. And now, she had lost Joshua. The one thing she had ruined everything for. The one person she had chosen over her husband. Gone. Because in the end, Joshua wasn't in love with her. He was in love with the lifestyle he thought she would bring him. And now that she had nothing, he was gone. Just like that. She blinked, staring blankly at the letter, her body hollow, numb, her entire life in ruins. And Daniel? Daniel was thriving. She had seen glimpses of it, in passing conversations, on mutual acquaintances' social media pages. He wasn't broken. He wasn't struggling. He was flourishing, still successful, still winning. And worst of all, he hadn't thought about her once. No calls. No bitter messages. Not a single attempt to rub it in. Because he didn't need to. She had already lost. And the worst part? She had done it to herself. Donna's fingers loosened. The letter slipped from her grip, floating soundlessly onto the coffee table. Her hands trembled. Her throat tightened. And for the first time since that courtroom, since she had watched Daniel walk out without looking back, she finally understood. There was no fixing this. There was no going back. There was only the crushing, empty silence of a life she had destroyed, and no one left to blame but herself. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Daniel leaned back in his chair, a fresh drink in his hand, watching the sun dip below the skyline. For the first time in years, he felt free.
Hey there, life is full of unexpected twists, just like the stories we share here. If this story touched you or made you think, consider subscribing to our channel. Every day, we bring you powerful real-life experiences of betrayal, resilience, and the strength it takes to keep going. Don't miss out. Join our community today, where we value truth, courage.
You heard me. Get out. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She just stood there in the doorway, arms crossed, lips pursed like she'd rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror. Behind her, through the half-open front door, the rhythmic purr of a Dodge Charger idling in our driveway filled the silence like a metronome counting down my sentence. 27 years. That's how long Nora and I had been married. Longer than her space, from reality, clearly. Because standing right there in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel like some triumphant gladiator in a midlife crisis costume, was Stan, her high school sweetheart. The same Stan who once drunkenly pissed in our azaleas during a 4th of July party in 1998. I remember. I had to hose the flowers down in the morning while he snored on our guest couch. Now he was back, upgraded with gym muscles, store-bought hair, and apparently a front-row ticket to my eviction. I looked at Nora. No makeup, no tears, not even fake regret. Her voice was sharp and mechanical, like she was reading off a script that had been printed 2 weeks ago and just needed a final performance. Her eyes flicked to the watch on her wrist like she had better places to be. Get out, Alan. We need space. Not I need space. We, as in her and Stan. They needed space from me. I was the clutter now. I didn't yell. Didn't argue. I didn't ask her who the hell she thought she was, or what kind of human invites their ex to hover in the driveway like a damn Uber while she throws out her husband of nearly 3 decades. I just inhaled. Deep and quiet. I could smell his cologne even from inside the house, some obnoxious, alpha leather scent that screamed. I peeked in 87. My keys were still on the hook by the door. I grabbed them, slid them into my pocket. I didn't take a bag, didn't grab my laptop. I didn't even take the jacket hanging by the coat rack. It was cold outside, but I figured I wouldn't be out there long enough to freeze. Not with the heat building up in my chest like a pressure cooker. I walked past her, slow and steady. She didn't move. Her breath smelled like rose and peppermint gum. She didn't deserve a scene. Not from me. Right before I stepped outside, I turned my head slightly. Not enough to face her, just enough so she'd hear me clearly. My voice was low. Calm. Too calm. Don't worry. I won't interrupt your plans. She didn't respond. But I caught the smirk. That tiny, curling twitch of the mouth. That's the kind of smile you wear when you think you've won. The kind that says he'll be crying in his car by midnight. Stan, from his throne on 4 wheels, actually gave me a little nod. That smug, male bonding, no hard feelings nod. Like he was doing me a favor. Like taking my wife off my hands was some kind of twisted bro code courtesy. I locked eyes with him for maybe half a second. Didn't say a word. Then I walked to my own car. Parked, ironically, in the far corner of the driveway because Stan needed space to pull in easier. I started the engine. No one followed. No one tried to stop me. No one begged me to stay. They thought it was over. That I was going to vanish quietly, lick my wounds, maybe text some college buddy asking to crash on a couch for a few nights. They didn't know. I wasn't broken. I was activated. The humiliation didn't sting the way it should have. Not because it didn't cut deep, it did. But because I'd already seen this coming. You don't live with someone for 27 years without noticing when the air changes. When their phone starts tilting away from you. When wine night with the girls becomes a weekly ritual. When the laundry starts to smell like someone else's cologne. Hell, I'd known something was off since the night I found a cufflink wedged between the cushions of our living room sofa. I don't wear cufflinks. Stan does. Or at least he used to, back when he was selling insurance door to door and wore them to seem important. So no, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't caught off guard. This wasn't heartbreak. This was execution. As I turned the corner and watched the house disappear in my rearview mirror, a thought hit me with such perfect clarity it actually made me grin. If they needed space, I'd give them space. Specifically, a vacuum. One where every account, every convenience, every tiny financial tether that Nora had taken for granted would quietly disappear. I didn't need to scream or beg. I had spreadsheets. I had contingency plans. And I had time. The quietest exits, after all, leave the loudest echoes. The first place I went wasn't my brother's guest room. Wasn't some dingy motel with buzzing lights and vending machine dinners either. It was Suite 209 at the Westland Executive Lofts. A modest, unassuming building tucked behind a warehouse district. The kind of place that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the Bush administration, and that was exactly why I bought it. I signed the paperwork for it 12 years ago, under a trust name, Ridgeline TNC Holdings. Back then, it was part of a quiet diversification plan I called Plan D for disaster. I never told Nora about Plan D. I never told anyone, really. It was one of those things you start because a voice in your gut whispers, one day, you'll need a place where no one can find you. Well, that voice had just been proven right. I walked into the suite. Still smelled faintly like old coffee and fresh drywall. Minimal furniture, a leather chair, desk, one twin bed. No sentimental clutter. Just function. There was a little safe in the closet. Already stocked. USB drives. Paper copies. A prepaid phone. Even an old laptop with nothing but Excel, QuickBooks, and a VPN. It was cold, impersonal, calculated, everything Nora had stopped being years ago. I sat down at the desk, opened the laptop, and got to work. First, the joint checking account. I'd already been monitoring it for months. Every Amazon order she placed. Every Sephora charge. Every weekend wine binge labeled Instacart delivery like it was some holy sacrament. I'd let it run long enough. Now it was time to remove myself. Click. Removed. Logged. Next, I opened a business account. Not under Alan Kinley. Not even under Ridgeline TNC. This one was under Lewis McAllister Financial, an entity I'd created 5 years ago for estate clients who needed confidentiality. Completely legal, fully registered. Lewis even had a social security number. I'd paid taxes under that alias longer than Stan's last marriage probably lasted. That account? Untouchable. That's where I dumped my half of everything. Savings. Liquid investments. Residual checks from old clients. Even my pension transfers. All rerouted. I didn't clear the joint account entirely. That would have been theatrical. No, I left enough in there to lull her. Just enough for one more Target run and maybe a salon appointment. Let her feel safe. Let her feel in control. Meanwhile, I was freezing credit lines one after another. I knew every account we'd ever opened. Macy's, Discover, Amex, Home Depot. The ones I used for house projects. The ones she used for dresses she returned later she never did. I didn't cancel them. That would have triggered alerts. No, I placed quiet holds. Claimed identity theft concerns. Cited suspicious out-of-state activity. I used my old CPA license code to push requests faster. Stan wanted her now? Let him also inherit the financial minefield I'd wrapped around her legs. Then came the insurance, auto, health, house. All of them were under my name. She was a secondary on every plan. One by one, I revoked authorization, changed mailing addresses, reassigned beneficiaries. Let her find that out at the dentist next month when she tries to swipe her ID card and gets told it's inactive. By the time midnight rolled around, the only trace of Alan Kinley that existed in her world was his ghost in the background of her Instagram memories. And I wasn't even done. I sat back in the leather chair and cracked my knuckles. I hadn't felt this awake in years. Not since Michelle, our daughter, got into Northwestern and Nora threw a wine-soaked tantrum about it being too far and too expensive. I remember sitting in the car afterward, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, thinking, why is everything a negotiation with this woman? That feeling was back, but inverted. Not rage. Not despair. Something sharper. Clarity. Stan may have taken her to steak dinners, but he hadn't seen the war room. He didn't know she was married to a man who built financial exit strategies for corporate CEOs and estate hoarders, who drafted contingency plans that outlived divorces, lawsuits, and the IRS. She had mocked my job as just spreadsheets. Stan had once joked I was too quiet to be dangerous. Good. Let them both enjoy the silence. Because the next time she reaches for a card, a key, or a password, she'll find nothing there. Not because it vanished, but because I moved it all. Quietly. Legally. Perfectly. And tomorrow, the real collapse would begin, with a single beep at a restaurant terminal. The photo hit my feed around 7:12 p.m. I wasn't looking for it. I don't follow Nora anymore. Hadn't for months. But Michelle does. And I'd created a burner account weeks ago to quietly monitor what Nora considered privacy. Her settings were public. Her captions, loud. And this one? Steak and freedom. Wineglass sparkles, hashtag finally free, hashtag no drama, just us. In the photo, she's leaning in to Stan, both of them holding wine glasses like it's a honeymoon dinner. Her smile is theatrical. His, forced, probably because the waiter had just delivered a $180 bill he assumed I'd still be subsidizing. Poor bastard. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the image for a second longer than necessary, then I locked the phone and turned back to the laptop. Finally free. Huh? Let's talk about freedom. I started with the small things. Utilities. Water, electric, internet, all those basic comforts that quietly hum in the background of a life. The accounts were all in my name. Nora never liked setting them up. Said she hated being on hold. I logged into the power company's portal. Changed the email. Changed the password. Then I scheduled the shut-off, not immediate. No, too obvious. I picked a strategic Friday afternoon, right before a long weekend forecasted to hit 90 degrees. Air conditioning? Optional now. Then internet. I downgraded the service to basic DSL. Effective immediately. Netflix and Hulu might stream a little slower with Stan buffering through every episode of Suits. Call it poetic justice. Next stop, streaming accounts. All of them, Netflix, HBO Max, Disney+, Spotify. I reset every password, kicked out every device, and added two-factor authentication to each one, with the backup codes sent to my Ridgeline TNC email address. She'd probably think it was a glitch. Call the support line. Get annoyed when they asked for the last 4 digits of the card on file, my card. She never even bothered to memorize it. Then came the real purge, the house. Our house. Built in 1997. Paid off in 2013. Hardwood floors. Crown molding. 2-car garage where I taught Michelle how to change her oil. I opened up the mortgage management portal, not for payment. No, that was long gone, but to download ownership records. Then I checked our home insurance policy. Still under my name. I added a note to the file. Please notify if secondary occupant attempts to file changes. The flag would hold until I processed the deed transfer. Spoiler, she'd never see that coming. Credit card statements were next. Not the ones she knew about. The ones she forgot about. Like the card we opened when Michelle went to college for emergencies only. Or the one we used for the kitchen renovation, now dormant, but still active, still with her on the authorized list. I logged in, deauthorized her, changed the mailing address, cut office statements, and requested physical bills to be sent to the Westland suite. Every trace of her financial access erased with the click of a mouse. And yet, there was something darker that night, something almost gleeful. This wasn't grief. This wasn't a man licking wounds. This was surgical. I wasn't just severing ties. I was disinfecting the wound, burning the tissue, ensuring there'd be no regrowth. No friendly coffee. No, maybe we made a mistake. No, Alan, can we just talk? Talk to Stan. Talk to the guy who, according to his LinkedIn, consults on motivational frameworks. The same guy who once borrowed $3,000 from us to launch a podcast and ghosted me when I asked if he'd filed a 1099. Let's see how motivated he feels when he's got to pay for their Uber home with a debit card that pings insufficient funds. Every shared point of contact, Verizon, our gym membership, the Amazon Prime account, was reviewed, edited, removed. I didn't even leave behind a forwarding address. Just a trail of locked doors she'd only notice once she was already inside. Around 10 p.m., I poured myself a small scotch. Just one. I sat back in the leather chair at Westland and stared out at the parking lot below, empty except for my car and one rusted-out sedan that never moved. The glass felt cold in my hand. The apartment was silent. But I wasn't alone. I had the password to every convenience she took for granted. I had control over every comfort she thought would keep flowing just because it always had. And I had no intention of warning her. She wanted freedom? Fine. Let her pay full price for it. The next evening, somewhere between the shrimp cocktail and her second glass of Pinot Grigio, Nora reached into her purse like a queen pulling a scepter. She smiled at the waiter, not warmly, but like a woman used to being served. The kind of smile that says, "I tip well when I'm admired." She handed over the first card, the platinum one with the gold trim. My name embossed on top, hers added as an authorized user beneath. Stan was leaning back, spearing asparagus like it had personally offended him. Probably talking about some coaching seminar he was designing, which, based on his track record, meant a shaky PowerPoint and 3 unpaid invoices. Nora nodded through his monologue like it was a TED Talk. Then the waiter returned. "I'm sorry, ma'am." It was declined. She blinked. Slow. Confused, like someone had spoken Latin. "Try it again," she said, smiling, more force this time. He did. Still declined. Nora laughed, too loud. Waved it off like static. "Ugh. Sometimes it flags out of state. Try this one." Card 2. Her go-to backup. Used to be our travel card. I'd gotten it when we went to Maui for our 20th anniversary, the one where she got a migraine every night after dinner. The waiter took it. Vanished. Stan frowned. "Everything good?" "Yeah," she said, brushing hair off her shoulder. "Just fraud protection stuff. Probably Alan didn't update the settings. You know how he is. Paranoid." Stan smirked. Figures. That was the moment. The exact second she spoke my name with that dismissive roll in her tone, like I was some socially inept accountant who didn't understand how modern cards worked. And then the waiter returned. "Sorry again. This one didn't go through either." The smile cracked. Not shattered, just frayed at the edges. A twitch at the corner of her mouth. Her nostrils flared, then retreated. She glanced at Stan. He blinked. "Try mine." Stan's card made it through. Barely. He winced as he signed the slip like someone had just siphoned his gas tank. Nora didn't touch her wine after that. Just sat a little stiffer. Looked down at her phone more often. She was probably scrolling through her banking app. Probably seeing the error message. Access temporarily restricted. Please call customer support. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that I'd been up that morning at 5:48 a.m., logging into every shared financial account and toggling their status like a composer rewriting sheet music. The flags I'd placed? Carefully calculated. I hadn't closed the cards. I'd paused them. Gave the bank just enough to act on fraud suspicion, just little enough to avoid immediate alerts. You see, I wasn't trying to cut her off. I was trying to confuse her. Shake the floorboards just slightly. Make her wonder when it had started. Was it last night? Was it a bank error? Was Alan really this petty? The panic had to feel just far enough away that she wouldn't see it coming, like a crack spidering across a windshield while you pretend you've still got time before it shatters. Meanwhile, Stan sat there, sipping his water like a man calculating how many more of these dinners he could afford before his credit limit turned into a brick wall. They walked out of that restaurant tighter-lipped than they walked in. No more Instagram selfies. No hashtags. Just a quiet ride home in a borrowed life that was starting to short-circuit. Nora didn't know that the decline wasn't the problem. It was the first warning shot. Because by the time the next bill came due, she'd be standing in a house she didn't own, driving a car she didn't control, opening a fridge filled with groceries she couldn't buy. But sure, Nora raised that glass. To freedom. Sunday brunch. French bistro, downtown. White tablecloths, fussy menus, waiters with suspenders and ironic mustaches. The kind of place where ordering a mimosa feels like auditioning for a lifestyle blog. Nora sat by the window, dressed in a breezy ivory blouse she'd probably borrowed from one of the overpriced subscription boxes we used to fight about. Stan, across from her, was already halfway through his Bloody Mary, talking about synergy and cross-brand verticals like any of it meant something. His shirt was too tight, collar straining against that thick neck he was so proud of. He looked like a divorced gym coach trying to get into tech. The waitress came with the check. Nora reached for her purse but stopped herself. "You've got this, babe," she said with that casual entitlement she used to coat every little ask in our marriage. Stan chuckled and slid his black card from his wallet like it was Excalibur. He didn't just hand it to the waitress, he presented it. 2 minutes later, she came back. No smile this time. "I'm sorry, sir." It was declined. "The system says there's a merchant hold placed by, She paused, confused. Looked at the printed slip. Alan T. Kinley Holdings. Nora's eyes narrowed like a spotlight. "What?" Stan leaned in. Wait, who the hell is Alan T? Kinley Holdings? The name hit the table like a dropped fork. She froze. Not visibly, not to strangers, but I know that woman. I know the way her fingers tighten slightly on her coffee cup. I know the tiny twitch in her left eyebrow that shows up when she's processing threat instead of inconvenience. Just try another card, she said, too fast, too sharp. Stan reached into his wallet again, fumbling this time. The swagger was gone. He looked like a guy realizing maybe he should have checked his own accounts before stepping into someone else's marriage. The waitress took the second card. Returned minutes later, same expression, same result. Stan stared at the bill, then at Nora, like she was supposed to explain it. She didn't. She couldn't. Because the name on that merchant hold wasn't random, wasn't a bank's placeholder. It was mine. On purpose. Alan T. Kinley Holdings wasn't just a shell company, it was a scalpel. And I made sure that name, specifically, was what would show up on their receipts when things went wrong. I wanted it to sting. I wanted them to ask. And now, finally, they were. Stan leaned forward. What the hell is going on? Nora forced a smile. It's probably just a glitch. But her voice cracked on glitch. Just barely. Like a hairline fracture in ceramic. She pulled out her phone under the table, thumb flying across the screen. Probably checking her Chase app. Her American Express. Whatever she still had access to. What she'd find. Frozen. All of it. Transactions marked with security flags. Accounts held pending investigation. Notes about suspicious activities filed by guess who? Me. Because I didn't just kill the cards. I redirected the pain. I made sure the mess looked like a web, not a door slamming shut. I wanted her to feel hunted by her own past decisions. I wanted her to realize this wasn't just revenge. It was architecture. Stan pushed back his chair. This is starting to feel personal. She didn't answer. Her hands were trembling slightly now, still clutching the phone. Probably trying old passwords. Probably texting someone, anyone, for help, not realizing every message was just a deeper echo chamber of her own undoing. The waitress stood awkwardly. I can take cash if you prefer. Nora looked up, eyes glassy but not from tears. It was confusion, dense, swallowing, irreversible. They scraped together enough to cover the bill. Stan left a $5 tip and didn't make eye contact on the way out. Outside, Nora turned to him. I think he's doing this. Stan raised an eyebrow. You think? His damn name's on the receipts. And just like that, the mockery cracked. The jokes, the smirks, the Alan's such a control freak narrative she used to recycle with her wine club gone. Now, in her place? Fear. The slow, simmering kind. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that asks, what else did I miss? And I hadn't even touched the house yet. Monday morning, 9:03 a.m. Nora stormed into Creststone Bank's downtown branch like a woman whose espresso hadn't landed fast enough. Except this wasn't about caffeine. This was about control and the sudden, terrifying realization that hers might have been an illusion. She was wearing that navy blazer she always threw on when she wanted to look like she knew what she was doing. But even the heels clicking across the marble floor couldn't mask the panic in her eyes. The same eyes that, just 3 days ago, had twinkled over filet mignon and clinked glasses with a man who couldn't pay for brunch. She approached the counter like she owned the building. I need access to our safe deposit box. Number 203. The clerk, a young guy named Matt with the kind of customer service smile that said I'm too underpaid for this, tapped a few keys. I'm sorry, ma'am. That box has a hold. She blinked. What kind of hold? Matt hesitated. A restriction on access. It was updated 6 months ago. The box is now under a single authorized signature. Nora's smile vanished. That's impossible. I've had access to that box for 20 years. He nodded awkwardly. Yes, but the access rights were legally amended in November. Her fingers gripped the edge of the counter. Amended by who? Matt squinted at the screen. By your husband. Alan T. Kinley. She stood there, frozen. Like someone had just read her a language she used to speak fluently but hadn't heard in years. Her lips moved like she wanted to form a word, but none came out. Just the sound of breath tightening behind clenched teeth. Can I speak to the branch manager? She said finally, her voice lower now, almost a growl. 10 minutes later, she was seated in a glass office across from a man in a blue tie and banker smile. His name tag read Gregory. He greeted her with the kind of placid tone they're trained to use when people start realizing the floor is gone beneath their feet. "I completely understand your frustration," Gregory said, hands folded. But the paperwork was thorough. Everything was signed, notarized, and properly filed under state regulations. She leaned forward. "But it's our estate." He didn't flinch. Technically, the original documentation listed the trust under Alan's sole authority. "You were listed as a beneficiary, not a trustee." Her mouth hung open. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means the owner of the trust can amend access rights at any time." Which he did, quietly and legally. She sat back, stared through the glass walls at the tellers beyond, the marble floor, the vault door in the distance. The last time she'd visited that vault was a year ago. She'd gone in to retrieve some birth certificates, if she remembered correctly. Didn't even think to ask why her key no longer worked that winter, assuming it was just a replacement issue. It wasn't. It was the beginning. She stood. Slowly. She didn't say goodbye to Gregory. Just gathered her purse and walked out of the office, her movements now rigid, shoulders locked, jaw clenched. Outside, the light was too bright. The street too loud. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, dialing. "Michelle? I need to talk to your father." Pause. Static. "Why?" Michelle said flatly. "I need to understand what he's doing." There was a sigh on the other end. "He's not doing anything. He's just done." And then, silence. Nora lowered the phone, looked at her reflection in the bank's glass doors. Hair immaculate, blazer straight, lipstick still intact. But beneath that, ruins. Because behind that vault door, box 203, was more than jewelry and documents. It was leverage, wills, asset records, a copy of the deed, originals of the estate restructuring Alan had executed before she even started flirting with Stan again. And now, it was all locked away. Her power didn't evaporate in a bang. It was filed away, stamped, and signed 6 months ago. The only thing louder than the silence in that vault was the sound of every assumption she ever made collapsing like a house of cards. Nora hadn't heard the doorbell ring in days. Not since brunch went sideways and Stan began spending more time in the garage than in the house, tinkering with God knows what in silence. He didn't offer comfort. He wasn't built for it. She knew that now. So when the chime echoed through the foyer mid-morning Wednesday, she jumped. She opened the door to find Michelle, our daughter, standing on the porch with her arms folded, keys dangling from her hand, and a look that didn't belong to a child anymore. 26, fresh out of her MBA, sharp as broken glass and twice as quiet. "Michelle," Nora blinked. "I didn't know you were coming." Clearly, Nora moved aside, ushering her in with forced warmth. "Well, come in. I can make coffee. I just bought a new frother." Michelle didn't move. "I'm not here for coffee." Nora hesitated. "Okay." They stood in the foyer, the silence stretching like tight fabric. Finally, Michelle broke it. "Why'd you scream at Dad like that?" The question landed like a hammer on tile. No preface, no build-up, just the drop. Nora blinked. "What?" "Don't play dumb," Michelle said, stepping forward. "You screamed at him, told him to get out, while Stan sat in the driveway like some smug rideshare driver." He was being difficult," Nora said, voice cracking with surprise. "You don't know the full story." "I do," Michelle said coldly. "I was the full story." Nora's face fell. "What's that supposed to mean?" Michelle exhaled. Not dramatic, controlled. Like she'd been holding this for days. "I've been helping Dad. For months." Nora's jaw tightened. "Helping him do what?" Michelle's voice didn't raise. "Helping him make sure that when you pulled the pin, he didn't go down with the blast." Nora laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous." Michelle didn't smile. "Do you know who updated his estate plan? Who notarized the trust revisions? Who helped him reroute his pension accounts and draft the clean asset split filings?" Nora stood frozen. Michelle nodded. "Me? You were spying on me?" "He didn't ask me to spy. He asked me to make sure he didn't have to fight you when it all came down. He didn't want war. He just wanted peace. You made it easy to go to war anyway." Nora stepped back like she'd been slapped. "I'm your mother," she whispered. "And he's my father," Michelle replied. "The one who taught me how to tie my shoes and balance a checkbook. The one who stayed up editing my essays while you were on wine nights and silent treatments. Don't you dare. No, you don't get to raise your voice now. You already burned that card screaming at a man who never once humiliated you, who paid off your parents' mortgage, who forgave your sister's debt because you asked. Nora's hands were shaking now. I didn't mean for it to. You did. Michelle cut her off. You didn't think he'd do anything about it. You thought he'd cry in his car, maybe sulk at some hotel, and just wait for your apology like always. Michelle stepped closer. But this time, Mom, he didn't just leave. He removed himself, like a surgeon cutting out a tumor, cleanly, precisely. Nora sat down on the edge of the couch, her legs suddenly unsure. Why are you telling me this? She asked, voice smaller. Because I thought maybe, you'd want to know why it's all slipping. Nora stared at the floor, blinking fast. Michelle watched her for a moment longer, then turned to the door. Don't call me, she said over her shoulder. I already picked a side. And just like that, the door clicked shut. Nora sat there, surrounded by curated decor and useless throw pillows, realizing the truth she'd ignored for months. The only thing colder than Alan's departure was Michelle's silence until now. And now, both were deafening. Stan lasted exactly 13 days. On the 14th, he walked out with a duffel bag and a line that didn't even try to sound kind. I thought you said he was just some boring number guy. Nora didn't respond. Couldn't really. Her mouth was dry, her temples pounding. She sat on the edge of the bed they used to share, hers and Alan's, and stared at a room that still smelled like aftershave she didn't buy. Stan paused by the front door like he expected her to say something. When she didn't, he shrugged, muttered something about not being built for drama, and let the door slam behind him. And just like that, the chaos he helped create was now entirely hers to manage. She didn't cry. Nora wasn't built for crying, not really. She got busy. She went into recovery mode. The same way she used to scramble when a charity gala needed last-minute donors or when Michelle's tuition paperwork had to be refiled at midnight. Task first, emotion later. She started with the desk drawer in the office, Alan's old domain. There had to be something. Old passwords, account statements, clues. Empty. Just a few paper clips and a dried-up pen. She moved to the hallway closet, pulling out boxes labeled Taxes 2017 and Travel Docs. Inside, junk. Outdated. Irrelevant. The good stuff had been wiped. Or worse, relocated. She checked the file cabinet next, the one they agreed years ago would be their shared archive. The folders were still there, neatly labeled. But inside, nothing but decoys. A manual for a lawnmower they sold in 2009. An expired coupon for carpet cleaning. The file labeled Mortgage Docs was stuffed with blank printer paper. It hit her in waves, not like a punch, but like frostbite. Slow, paralyzing. She grabbed her laptop and tried logging into their joint investment portal. Invalid password. Tried the online mortgage portal. No account found under this email. Tried resetting the passwords. Recovery email not recognized. She grabbed her phone, sweating now, calling the number for Crestview Title Services, the agency they used when they refinanced 5 years ago. Hi. I need to verify the deed information on my home, she said. The voice on the other end was polite, professional, oblivious to the undertone Nora was sinking into. Sure, ma'am. Can I have your name and property address? She gave it, waited, listened to the click of keys on a keyboard. Then silence. Then, okay. So this property is currently listed under Kinley Strategic Holdings, LLC. Nora's voice caught. Excuse me? That's my house. The clerk continued, tone still maddeningly neutral. Yes, ma'am, it was transferred under the holding company's name last November. All documents are in order. Is there anything else I can assist you with today? She hung up without answering. Kinley Strategic Holdings. Not Alan. Not even her Alan. It was his company. One she didn't even know existed until today. She was living in a house that didn't legally belong to her. Her name wasn't on the deed. She wasn't even on the insurance anymore. She had no claim, no leverage, no seat at the table. She was a tenant, a guest. No wonder the utilities had started coming in generic envelopes addressed to current occupant. She stood in the center of the living room, spinning in slow circles like a woman trying to retrace footsteps in a sandstorm. She opened drawers, flipped bookshelves, clawed through every purse and junk basket an email folder she could remember. It was all gone. No documents. No passwords. No traces. She reached for her phone and instinctively opened a group chat she hadn't used in months. Nora and Alan. Household. The last message was from her. Sent 7 months ago. Hey, I ordered some new cookware with the Amex. Don't freak out. Sale was crazy good. Smiling face with smiling eyes. No reply. He'd seen this coming. He hadn't hoped she'd change. He'd just prepared for when she didn't. And now she was standing in a house full of curated art and expensive rugs and smart home tech she couldn't even reset because he had the admin password for all of it. This wasn't just financial severance. It was total erasure. She hadn't been replaced. She'd been deleted. It came on a Thursday. No knock. Just a quiet buzz from the gate intercom, followed by the low rumble of a delivery van pulling away before she could even reach the window. When Nora opened the front door, the envelope was already on the welcome mat. White, thick, with no return address. Just her name, typed. Not handwritten. No warmth. She didn't think much of it at first. Thought maybe it was another useless HOA bulletin or a delayed wedding invite from someone she didn't like. But when she picked it up, the weight was different. Heavier. Intentional. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Crisp. Laser printed. At the top, her full name. Below it, the property address. No salutation, no paragraph, no flourish. Just 2 words at the bottom, centered. Occupancy terminated. She stood in the foyer, rereading it 3 times before the meaning actually registered. Her first instinct was to laugh. It was absurd. Terminated? Like she was a leaseholder. Like she was squatting in her own damn house. Except it wasn't her house. Not anymore. That was just muscle memory talking. The document said otherwise. And now, the paper in her hand screamed the same. She scrambled for her phone, hands fumbling like she was defusing a bomb. Called her lawyer, Diane something, a referral from her wine club, the kind of lawyer more known for her tennis game than actual courtroom wins. Voicemail. Diane, it's Nora. I just got this paper. It says I'm being evicted. That Alan. He's trying to remove me from the property. I need this stopped. Immediately. Call me back the second you get this. She hung up and sat down on the marble bench by the entryway, the envelope still open on her lap, like it might suddenly change contents if she blinked hard enough. 10 minutes passed. No call. She dialed again. This time, she called Crestview Title Services directly. Again. Yes, this is Nora Kinley. I spoke to someone earlier this week. I need confirmation of ownership. Again. I'm being told I don't have rights to my residence, and that. The voice on the other end was different now. Older. Colder. Miss Kinley, we're not authorized to discuss that property with you. The managing entity has restricted disclosures to the title holder only. Her throat dried. I am the title holder. No, ma'am, the voice said firmly. That home is owned by Kinley Strategic Holdings, LLC. You're not listed on any documentation. Click. She sat perfectly still, the dial tone humming like a flat line in her ear. No access. No name on the deed. No paperwork that proved she ever had a stake in any of it. Because she didn't. Alan had removed her 6 months ago. Quietly. Legally. Permanently. Every day since she'd told him to get out. She'd been living in a house that, by every law and line of ink, no longer acknowledged her existence. And now, with one printed sentence, he'd confirmed the truth. She was a guest, and the host had just rescinded the invitation. The room around her felt foreign. The hardwood floors she once bragged about? Cold. The kitchen island where she'd staged those picture-perfect cheese boards for Instagram? Useless now. The walls felt narrower. The air heavier. This wasn't her kingdom anymore. It was a vault she'd been locked into, by her own design. And that single sheet of paper? It wasn't just a message. It was the final card. Played with silence. Delivered with precision. And designed to collapse her world in a whisper. Alan's office was nothing like Nora remembered. The last time she'd been there. Maybe 6, 7 years ago. It was a quiet, cluttered place filled with paper stacks, dusty binders, and that awful faux wood desk he refused to replace. Back when he still brought work home, still apologized for missing dinner, still thought providing meant something. Now it looked like something out of a corporate thriller. Glass, steel, no clutter. Minimalist. Clean lines. Everything calculated and quiet, like him. Even the receptionist, young, unbothered, with a voice that sounded like she'd been trained to neutralize chaos, didn't flinch when Nora stormed past. She didn't bother knocking, just burst through the door like a gust of entitlement. Stan trailed behind her, red-faced and out of breath. "This is insane," he muttered. "He can't just—" Alan looked up from his desk. Calm. No smile. No welcome. Just that slow, precise blink of a man who had already predicted this scene down to the second. Nora stood across from him, trembling, not from fear, but from rage that had nowhere else to go. "I want to know what you did," she said, voice cracking. Alan looked at her, then at Stan, then back at her. She tossed the eviction letter on the desk. "You had no right." "I had every right," he interrupted softly. Stan stepped forward, trying to puff up like a rooster. "You humiliated her. Us. You froze our accounts. You cut off access. You." Alan opened a drawer, pulled out a thin navy blue folder, the kind financial advisors use for presentations. He placed it neatly on the desk between them. "You asked who closed your cards," Alan said quietly. Nora hesitated. Stan grabbed the folder and opened it. Inside, a printout. Page after page of bank statements. Transaction logs. Account summaries. Each one with a name stamped across the top in bold. Alan T. Kinley Holdings, LLC. Every charge. Every freeze. Every action. Documented. Timed. Signed. Stan's face twisted. "You tricked us." Alan tilted his head. "No, Stan. I stopped sponsoring you." Nora's mouth parted, but no words came. Just silence. Her eyes scanned the statement in Stan's hand, flicking over transaction codes and authorization notes. All of them linked to entities she didn't even know existed 6 months ago. Stan shoved the folder back onto the desk. "This is war, man." Alan didn't flinch. "It was war the moment you parked in my driveway." Silence again. Cold. Clean. Surgical. Nora stepped back, slowly now, as if her body finally caught up to what her brain had been denying for weeks. She wasn't just outmaneuvered. She'd been audited, dissected, and zeroed out by the man she thought she could humiliate into silence. Alan stood up, not to gloat, just to end it. "Your keycards are deactivated. Your emails are closed. You'll receive no further communication from my office. If you stay past noon in my house, security will handle it. If you contest the trust, you'll lose. This conversation is over." He looked at Stan. "And you? Find a new investor." Stan opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't have the vocabulary for this kind of loss. Not the financial kind. Not the moral kind. Especially not both at once. They left in silence. Outside the glass office walls, the receptionist never looked up. Alan sat back down, picked up a pen, and returned to his notes. One more page. One more task. And with it, the final entry in a ledger that no longer included their names.